Pro Football Focus is releasing their position groups ratings for offense and defense. The Oregon Ducks are rated in the top 10 in every category but one, linebacker.
Yep.
Coming in the top 5 in the wide receiver position, quarterback position, offensive line, and defensive back.
And all of those make sense when you look at, I think this, and I've been praising the receiver room since the beginning of spring ball. When you go down there, you look at the viable targets and the guys that they feel comfortable with at wide receiver. And you got to throw tight end in there as well with the way that they use them, from, Evan Stewart, the Texas A&M transfer, who is living up to all of the hype and all of the build as being the dude on the outside, a game-breaking wide receiver that any questions that he had about his fit and, character after Texas A&M, they have gone away with his time at Oregon, where everybody's just raving about him being a locker room guy as well. And then you have Tez Johnson, who returns for his super senior year after an incredible year last year with Bo Nix. And then with Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant Jr., that room is very loaded. And then there's guys that aren't getting a lot of the hype that I think we will see a lot of, whether it's Kyler Casper or Justice Lowe, who had a really good spring, and then Gary Bryant Jr. But the tight end room as well, with Terrence Ferguson, the name that everybody knows, and Patrick Herbert, if he can stay healthy, is going to be a viable target on the outside. But Kenyon Sadiq, the sophomore from Idaho, that guy put together a spring that he is going to have a special year as a blocker and a receiver. He made some plays throughout the spring that you just eye-popping. And so Pro Football Focus has them as the number 1 receiver room in the country this year. You can see why. At quarterback, with not just Dylan Gabriel coming in from Oklahoma, I still do, and I've said this before, it will be interesting to see the mastery of the offense that Dylan Gabriel could have, because we saw Bo Nix and just comfortability with your wide receivers and the conceptually what you are trying to do. The familiarity he has with a lot of the concepts that they ran at Central Florida and then at Oklahoma with Will Stein's offense, it shouldn't be too big of a learning curve. But you see with mastery of offense, the jump that Bo Nix took from year 1 to year 2, you only have 1 year with Dylan Gabriel. But what is behind him is, I think, getting people excited as well. Dante Moore transferring up from UCLA. And then, obviously, I could not speak more highly of Austin Novosad.
You
was
mentioned
impressive.
him a ton off air as far as how he looked and his command and his feel and just his growth within the system.
He will be he's going to be really damn good. He looks different, and you see the year 1 to year 2, his knowledge of what they're trying to do. It was impressive during the spring. But they have the number 2 quarterback room in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. But I think that is, obviously, it's heavily skewed to Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore, and having a 1-2 punch that you have there. The defensive backs and the offensive line both rated 5th in the country. Transfer portal was huge for the defensive back room. When you look at guys like Jabbar Muhammad, Cam Alexander, transfers from Washington and UT San Antonio, respectively. Kobe Savage, the Kansas State transfer that came in during the spring. Left spring game early with an injury, but the defensive back room, you have Tysheem Johnson returning this year along with Nico Reed. That room is going to be a solid one. And the offensive line, this has just kind of been that slow build.
Yeah, that one, the 100% makes sense to me. I don't know if I truly buy into the number 1 wide receiver room in the country. And this is not a slight to Oregon at all. When I think of number 1 wide receiver room, I think of Ohio State. I think of Washington and the absolute monsters they had at the top. The depth Oregon definitely has.
The top end talent with Evan Stewart.
You think that's reminiscent of Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze?
No, but I think that if you look around the room, if you look around the entire country, it is not Ohio State. They are stacked everywhere.
Every position, which we'll get to here in a minute.
But what they are going through is you graduate 2 of your top receivers. That changes.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Igbuka is going to have to be the number 1 guy. The guy, a product of Steilacoom up in Tacoma area. He's the best receiver in college football right now. And I think that if you look at depth and then the high end talent, where Tez Johnson is a known now. Evan Stewart is a known, and the production is going to be there. But I think that it is the depth and the weapons that are – the one thing Oregon's receiver room has that is different this year than it has been before, and I think this is where maybe you get that bump up, as well as they can match up with a litany of defenses. If you want to go speed, they've got speed. If you want to go size, they can get you with size. They can use personnel groupings this year where you can roll out in 12 personnel with 1 back and 2 tight ends, but then you can motion out and you'll be an empty. And you will have to have a defense on the field that has to respect a 12 personnel grouping with Terrence Ferguson, Kenyon Sadiq, or Patrick Herbert at the other tight end and a running back. But then all of a sudden you can shift out of that and you have receiving backs that have proven themselves, whether it is Noah Whittington or Jordan James at the end of the year, was a more than viable receiving target. It's the way that they'll be able to use their receiver groupings and put defenses in binds. I think that truly is, that's different this year than what we've seen in the past from Oregon. But I'm with you that there is going to be all right, let's see him put it all together, right? And we don't know, and it seems unfamiliar because it's usually the same usual suspects as the number 1 receiver groups, whether it's Ohio State, USC, Alabama, Texas. They have all been the usual suspects. This is a little bit different, and the transfer portal has been huge for that with Oregon.
And again, my pushback isn't that it's not a very good receiver room. It's that number 1 guy, typically when you have the number 1 receiver room in the country, you have a dude who is a dude amongst dudes that you go, yeah, he's going top 5, top 6 in the NFL draft, like unequivocally.
I think what you will see is Evan Stewart will be getting a lot of hype coming around.
You think he'll make that swing into that kind of group?
He makes.
I mean, he was an incredibly high-level recruit, big body, like all the stuff that he has all the makings and trimmings of being that guy.
The wheels fell off at Texas A&M last year.
He's not the only one that happened to.
I think, and then you look at the defensive line room. Defensive line was a question for Oregon heading into this season, where the depth is. The fact is that Jamari Caldwell, the transfer from Houston, they get a transfer from Michigan State late in the portal process. The defensive line room being ranked 10th in the country, that is the one that surprised me a little bit, because of the fact that there were holes and questions when you come in, whether it is, you're having to replace Popo and Casey Rogers in the middle. You had big Brandon Dorless on the outside. You have got, and the versatility of Dorless, being able to jump him inside to outside. I think that was a little bit more of the surprise for me in looking at this group, is that the defensive line group being ranked in the top 10, when the reality of it is that, Oregon, you'll look at it and you'll be like, most people say, 4-2-5, right? You're going to basically mostly nickel hybrid package, right? But they've moved a lot of the outside linebackers and put them and thrust them kind of into defensive end roles, right? Where your defensive ends are going to be really damn good. Jordan Birch returns after, he got dinged up a couple of times. Elijah Rushing, who's at the other defensive end, the 5-star pass rusher, looks like an absolute monster of a human being on the outside there. But then you also look at guys like that jack linebacker position, where Mateo Uyunglele and Tatum Tuioti will be at that jack linebacker, essentially playing a defensive end-esque position. Not ranked. The only position group Oregon did not have ranked in this Pro Football Focus in the top 10 was linebacker. And it is not in the traditional sense, and it's okay not to have them in a top 10, because it's not the traditional linebacker position group as we know it, right? There's not a bunch of like NFL ready-made dudes that are sitting there. But what they have is Jeffrey Bassa, Fiesta Bowl MVP, who is a 53 and a third guy, where he can play sideline to sideline and stretch plays out. They also have Justin Jacobs, who once he got healthy and was in the mix, was a force, and he can play more of gap fit linebacker there, along with Jerry Mixon. And then you have Bryce Betcher, who was not there in the spring. I think linebacker's gonna be a solid position.
Why wasn't he there in spring, Dustin?
Because he was winning a gold glove on the baseball field, which is so crazy.
That's such a weird thing for a linebacker to be an outfielder.
Right?
First base, third base, bigger, a little fluidity. But linebacker playing outfield?
Linebacker is, and we saw his flashes at linebacker. He started become more comfortable. He had one of the more memorable plays in my mind was in that Texas Tech game was when he had the forced fumble coming off the edge, and he was stacked in the middle, and he was in the B gap, and then he looped around and made an incredible play against Texas Tech. I think linebacker it will be seen as a weakness on this team, but the guys that they have there, if they stay healthy, plenty of room for development. This Oregon team, it rightfully has a lot of hype around it because of the talent that they have brought in. Now it is going to the Big Ten, and if you look at the Pro Football Focus makeups, it is littered across the board with Big Ten teams. Whether it's Ohio State, where every single category they have a top 10 unit. Michigan, they may have lost 18 guys in the NFL draft.
They reload.
They are going to be, where they are strong, they are going to be insanely strong.
I mean, hell, and then look at even a team like Iowa, whose entire defense is showing up on the list.
Yes, they're almost in every single category.
Not a single thing on offense.
Wisconsin is also in that boat, where their secondary, there's going to be tests across the board. Penn State is littered across this, whether it's at wide receiver, defensive back, linebackers. The Big Ten is loaded week in and week out. The thing is, Oregon has Wisconsin. They've got Ohio State. They have Michigan. All three of those teams are going to be on there. You're going to see those tests
will be had.
Through. I mean, it will be. And look, Wisconsin's quarterback room is on this list. Because you have Phil Longo, he's a hybrid air raid type guy. It's still Wisconsin football, but it's not.
They'll find a way to get you a little. It's a spicy Wisconsin.
It's not Ron Dane back there, but they're gonna whip the ball around the field, and they've shifted, and they are talented offensively. It's gonna be really fun to kind of see. But as I was looking through all of these position group rankings, it's impossible to ignore Ohio State. I said this when I watched their spring game. It's the most talented team I saw all spring.